Thank you. Thank you so much, Bill and Gigi. Thank you for running with it last week. I had a listen. It was awesome. It was awesome. I think we're gonna have 1 minute, just getting quiet. Let's connect. Let's connect to spirit. Whatever. Just let's ground. Let's get settled down. I'm gonna put the timer on now for 1 minute, starting now. Thank you for joining me out there in the realm of the spirit. We're on page 55 on the third paragraph. Is it a new that's just joined us for the first time? Welcome. Welcome. We're so happy to have you here. The format of this meeting is Bill and I back and forth as we read through the big book. And once the hour is over, we hopefully get a chance to go quiet and hear you share back and ask some questions. So hold on to those questions for a little later, or you can dump them in the chat as well. Page 55, third paragraph. We're in We Agnostics. This is a chapter that's about this thick, but I tell you what, it is actually kilometers and kilometers and kilometers thick. Each time I wade through these pages, there's just more ahas and more epiphanies, like my brother Bill will always say. Right, so we've looked at how we've worshipped, how we've had a sense of faith, because we're wrestling here with, is there a God? Because we've got to move on into step 2 now. Is there a God? But I've got so much prejudice against God. Do you know the God of my childhood was so awful? Have you seen the church people, what they do? And we're going back and forth, and we're looking at the fact these spiritual things that we've done. We've had faith. We had faith in the bottle, in the bags, and between the sheets. And now we're asking you to have faith in a higher power. And we've gone through and we've looked at some of the prejudices. But now it makes a really big statement. It says, actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. There's that idea, that thinking word. There's an idea we have. So you know what, guys, let's just for a second, everybody sitting here with us tonight, in your heart of hearts, in your heart of hearts, deep down, you know there's something, you know it. Some of you have come to experience it over and over, and you're clinging on to your daily reprieve, and you're getting to experience it every day. Some of us are still seeking and searching and wondering why we're not getting it. But deep down, you know. Okay. Bill, jump in. I think he's ready.
Did you get my chat?
Yeah, I got the message.
How do you like that idea? Do you want me to do that real quick? Because it's kind of leading up to what we're doing. So for those who were not here last week, or those who did not have the good fortune of hearing the recording, on the bottom of page 54, the last sentence in this entire chapter is directing us to the location of where we may find the power. And as we've discussed, and we'll find out in chapters 5 and 6, it will tell us how to get there. Chapter 7, it will tell us what to do once we get there. So we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanate from our best minds. What about people who proved man could never fly? Yet we have been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible, and we always smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't so. And then we began today with Nadia, starting on the second full paragraph on 55, saying, actually, based on all that information we just gave, we're denying it, we're putting it out of our minds, smiling, and saying it wasn't so. Actually, we were fooling ourselves. And I'll say one thing before I give it over to you, Nadia. I always was blaming other people for fooling me. But as one of my mentors taught me, I was trying to believe something I couldn't believe. I was the one who was being deceived by myself, no one else. So take it away, mate.
Thanks, brother. Actually, our problems of our own making, right? So thanks. All right. Deep down inside every one of us. This is so cool. This chapter tells us where we find God. We don't have to go to the highest mountain in Tibet. We don't need to move to a different continent. We don't need to change our name or shave our head. We get to find out that actually he's deep down inside every single one of us. But there is a couple of conditions here. That idea might be, it goes on to say, be obscured, blocked by calamity, pomp, worship of other things, but in some form or other, it is there. So what is he talking about when he says calamity? Some of us are sitting here, we've had major trauma, one after the other. Some of us are suffering desperately with depression and suicidal thoughts. Some of us have had some death in our family, like unbelievable freak accidents of people that we've lost. We just can't understand why. It's been blocked by pomp. That's ego, pride. I'm either on top of the heap or I'm right under the heap. Self-loathing, or we just think we're the absolute shit chisel dizzle. Or worship of other things, making sex our God, or money our God, or possession, or position, people, places, things, the things we've worshipped. Maybe that's blocking us from this fundamental idea of God, this essential idea of God. I just want to quickly quote Charlie. For some of you who've been listening to any of the Joe and Charlie tapes, Charlie says, if you're not having fun in this program, you're sure to go mental. Just a little side note there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstration of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. Power. Remember, for those, and I see we've got a newcomer with us tonight who's reached out and saying he's struggling. Sam saying, if you can change your name, it'd be great to know who you are. Stick around after the meeting. We're not here to help you find God, because whether you know it or not, it's deep down inside all of us. What we are here to do is help broker your relationship with the power of God. That's what we're here to do. So if you can, reach out, send us your number, but we'll chat to you after the meeting. Bill, go ahead.
Yes, you may never hear this on any of the other compendiums, but you will hear this loud and clear today. This word of. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to do a whole talk on it, Naja and Barnes. I'll let you know. But the word of says expressing the relationship between a part and a whole. So it says here, deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental mental idea of God. They're not saying it's my idea about this power. What it's saying is the idea emanates from the source, that the idea is part of the whole. It's the idea of God. It's not all of a sudden I come up with a conclusion that there ought to be something greater than me because I'm in trouble. It's been there all along. That's a powerful word, OF. Thank you, Naja. It might
Thank
take
you
you
so
4 decades to
much.
realize that, because that's how long it took me to realize what they're talking about. The idea was not ours.
I need to just pause this video and write all of that down. Luckily, I can go back to the recording. we finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. And there's this, when I looked at the sentence, I just thought about how it's taken me, I'm back in now for what, 4 years. And I can only truly say, truly, in all honesty, because I'm here with, this is what we do, we get honest with each other in these rooms. I can say that now, at this stage of my recovery, I am truly having feelings for friends. It's not out of duty. It's not out of, I have to do this. When I see their names on my phone, I want to answer it because I want to hear their voices. There's this love that's emanating out of me. It's not something I manufacture. It's not something I can pretend. I have pretended lots in my life. And I realized that this is what they're talking about, that feeling that comes out of us somewhere along this line in this journey of recovery. It's that God love. It's that love from God that we have for each other. And it also says here that this faith in God was a part of our makeup. The problem is that there's a part of me that doesn't want God to be part of my makeup. There's a part of me that hates God guts. There's a part of me that has to do inventory on God and church and old ideas. And we harp on a lot about old ideas. So that's the part of us that we're going to have to look at. And we're going to be moving into inventory very soon. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly. There I said it, there's the warning. We're going to go into step 4 soon, but he was there. Where else are they making references to that searching fearlessly, to what blocking us? Let's go look. Page 64, first paragraph. I'll wait for you, or I'll just read it. Page 64, the first paragraph, it says here, we had to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Blocking us from what? From God. Another reference is on page 72, first paragraph. Let's go check it out. He says here, oh gosh, I'm a little bit lost. Where am I? We have been trying to write in the beginning.
Right?
Yeah.
The obstacles in our path. Yeah, first paragraph.
That's it. That's it. We've been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship, and to discover the obstacles in our path. And that's what step 4 does. It looks at, because all we want to do, guys, is we want to clear this channel, because deep down inside of us is God. We just want to clear that channel so that that power of God can flow in and through and around us. That's all it is. That's all it is. So we can carry the message and help the other still suffering, sleeping brothers and sisters in and outside of these rooms. Oh, what a cool promise it says, but he was there. We just got to remove those obstacles and we're going to find out that God's there. That's a cool promise. There's tons of promises coming, by the way. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality. Remember, we said if the God word still makes the hackles on your neck rise, in this chapter are tons of spiritual terms that you can use to replace the word God with. Okay, if you don't like the word God, you can use the word great reality. Here it is. Deep down, there it is. Again, deep down in your heart of hearts, it's within us. And in the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. I have looked everywhere. I know that there's still more places for me that I could have looked, but I had looked everywhere. I'd looked in the forests, in the sweat tents, in the sweat camps, in the silent retreats, in the yoga camps, in between the sheets, in the bottle of baggies, in the bottle of bottles. I have looked everywhere for God. I have looked. I didn't know that's what I was looking for. I was looking for that experience that my first drink gave me. It was so with us. We can only clear the ground a bit. If our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, there's that reference to old ideas again. Our testimony, what's that? That is our experience, strength, and hope. That's when somebody comes to a meeting and they do a lead share. They tell you how they were, what happened, and how it's like for them now. They talk about how they built a relationship with God. If those stories that you've heard in meetings and those stories that you read in the back of this book can help you clear away just a few of the old ideas, enable you to think honestly, because that don't come naturally. That don't come naturally to an alkie like me, and encourage me to search diligently within yourself, then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. Bill?
Hey, Nadia. So let's look at the transition that takes place between these two paragraphs. I mean, this is so There's so much stuff going on in here that's so powerful, we could almost miss it. The first paragraph that you started with today says, for faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are, A-R-E, current, existing, right now, are facts as old as man himself. In the next paragraph, it's talking about was, as if it's past tense. You with me? We finally saw that faith in a power was a part of our makeup just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. He was there. They're not talking about he was there and then he's not. It wasn't like they visited my house, right? Paul was in Akron, Ohio. Now he's back in England. That's not the was they're talking about. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep within us in the last analysis. So what they're telling us here is we've got to remember that up to this point, these are people writing a book about an experience they had. This chapter is so tricky that it pulls me in, and I think that I'm in the moment with the people writing the book, but I am not. I'm reading this story of how so many alcoholics recovered. So what they're saying is, he is, not he was, but what they discovered was a past tense description of what happened with them. That may mean little to some of us, but it means a lot when you realize that when it says this, for faith, hold on, faith in some kind of God. Now, they're not saying that it might not be like the mythology gods, but faith in some. We should pause that for a second so I get my thinking straight. We saw that faith in some kind of a God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling as we have for a friend. So it's a part of our makeup. It's in our DNA. When you look at a baby and you can't help but to love the baby, when you make an acquaintance and you have that kinship, that's natural. It doesn't, we don't have to do much to do it. In fact, what we have to do is go against our own nature to not like our brothers and sisters. And that's what the 4 steps about, is finding out why I'm going against my nature, resent, to be afraid of, or to harm my brothers and sisters. Because if I knew we were all one, I would do none of those things. But what happens is I forget that God is God. I think I'm God, and I start separating the wheat from the chaff. But what it's telling us is it was placed there in the beginning, just like whatever DNA determined the color of our eyes. I want to say hair, but I don't have much of that. But in other words, the genetic composition that we see in the physical realm, underneath that, we have DNA coming from the God, and it's there, whether we acknowledge it, whether we believe in it, or whether we have an attitude about it. It doesn't change the nature of God and what he placed in us. That's by divine design. That's why you'll find out on the next page, if we get there by, say, December, smile, Nadia, that we're going to find out there was a guy who thought he was an atheist. But in the point of collapse and despair, something inside of him cried out to this power. And the power appeared because it had been there the whole time. It didn't make an entrance.
So Bill's not saying just really cool things that are just coming flying out of his head. He's actually speaking big book here. And on page 62, it tells us that we are children of God, which means we have his DNA running through us. We are laser designed by God. And the whole idea is to clear the bullshit in our minds that tell us we're not good enough, we're never going to be there, we can't be a sponsor, we're never going to get this deal, we're always going to die. We got to clear that stuff, and we're moving into inventory very soon. Laser designed. We have his DNA inside of us. If then If then you can join the broad highway with this attitude, what attitude? They're saying, if you can think honestly, if you can clear away some prejudice, if you can search diligently within yourself, the instructions are in the center previously to that, there's those three. If you can do that with that attitude, you cannot fail. Listen to this awesome promise. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. So if you believe in a really finite, bitchy, conditional God, then I'm sorry, that's going to be the kind of God that's going to be running your show. But if you can come and believe in the infinite God that the pages of the big book introduces to us, that's the kind of magic show you're going to be witnessing if you continue on this path with us, on this broad highway. So for a second, let's just make some of these statements. Are we prepared to sweep away prejudice? Are we prepared to think honestly? That's going to take some doing, because that stuff doesn't come naturally. We're going to need the power of God to do that. And are we going to search diligently? Because that work's coming up. That work is coming up. That's not your deal, then, we'll still be around in a year or two or 300, I hope. In this book, there it is. This is what Bill's talking about. In this book, you will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. I'm going to jump on over to Bill. There's that word again, that thinking word. Remember, we said we've got to get a highlighter out so that we can highlight all the thinking words. He thought he was an atheist.
Yeah, one thing real quick before you get into this story. Encourages you to search diligently within yourself. It says somewhere else in this chapter, if we fearless in our search, and we're going to get to step 4, which says we made a searching and fearless moral inventory. This book is so divinely crafted. It's telling us if we cut through the layers of self through this inventory, that's the diligent searching, that we will strike the mother lode. The treasure is deep within us. This is the treasure map. The instructions in this book are so important that we cannot afford to misstate them, to misteach them, or to misunderstand them. I remember saying to my sponsor once, after 30 years of coming here and just give it, I said, David, I don't understand the steps. He says it does not say here are the steps we understood. It says here are the steps we took. I may never understand the steps, but if I don't understand the instructions, Nadja, how can I follow them? So you brought up something a page ago, and I'm not here to correct anyone with obstacles or blockage. But I remember what was a pivotal point where I realized that that my mind could finally change. A guy came into the crisis unit where I was at, and he said, how many people have taken a 4th step? We were all brand new, and I was hiding in the back because I knew him from AA, and I was embarrassed that I was here again. So I didn't open my mouth because I didn't want him to see me. And he started talking about step 4, and he said, what do you think it's talking about when it talks about blocked? Blocked from what? And I knew the answer, just like you said, was God. But here's what he said. He didn't say God, not right away. He said, are you blocked from happiness? Are you blocked from peace of mind? I said, oh my God, I am blocked from everything, Nadja. And what happened is I realized that although I knew part of the answer, I didn't have the answer. And I said, if I was wrong about that, could I be wrong about other things? Could I be wrong about everything? And for the first time in 4 decades, sitting in that crisis center, my mind opened up to a new experience. Prior to that, the only thing I knew was what was convinced that I knew and convinced that I was right of. I was so agnostic in my belief, not in my anti-belief, but in my belief. It was blocking me from any experience, not only a new one with this power. And that's why we start with the set aside prayer. because every idea I have up until this second may be wrong. Not all of them, maybe, but enough of them that I'm willing to have a new experience today with God and discard anything that doesn't work for a new idea or concept that does. This is so powerful. It's telling us the kingdom is within. We were given that by the master 2,000 years ago, and we're still looking up beyond the clouds. Remember what they said, folks. If you're looking for God, put down the telescope and pick up a pen.
Oh man, there's so much going on here. This chapter, I tell you, is incredible. So Bill was talking about a treasure, a mother lode, the gold. Let's go look where he's talking about. It comes from the page 129, right at the top. Father feels he has struck something better than gold. For a time, he may try to hug the treasure to himself. He may not see at once that he has barely scratched a limitless load, which will pay dividends only if he minds action it for the rest of his life and insists on giving away the entire product. Thanks, my brother. That's amazing. Blocked from everything, page 52. That's where we lived. And there's going to be a couple of descriptions of the alcoholic lifestyle. We're about to dig into that now. You're going to look at how it looks when we are blocked from everything. The spiritual principles that we're trying to get you connected to here, the joy, the happy, the free that they keep mentioning in the rooms. Let's go look what our lives look like when we're not connected, when we are blocked. Let's go look. So Fitz Mayo, for anybody who wants to know, his story in the 3rd edition is on page 497. And in the 4th edition, it's on page 208. And if you want to know what he looks like, you can go look there at Rob's screen. There he is hanging out behind him. And for our listeners on YouTube, Google's your friend. All right, let's go look. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. Why am I emphasizing that? Because dramatic is physical, convincing is a mental change, and a moving change is spiritual. They keep referring to it. It's physical, mental, and spiritual disease, this. Let's go look what it looks like. Our friend was a minister's son. Uh-oh, he's had religion rammed down his little head, down his throat, Sunday to Monday. He attended church school Monday to Friday, where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose, go think, of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration. Here you go, guys. So this is us, rebellious, dogged by trouble and frustration. Is that me? Is that you? Has that been your life? Business failure? Are you a business failure? Have you been a business failure? Insane, fatal illness, suicide? These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Have I been embittered? Have I been depressed? Post-war disillusionment. What's the point of life? What's the point of this whole deal? Why am I still alive? Ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. There's your CV as an alcoholic with an alcoholic mind and no spiritual solution. That's your CV. There it is. Your work contract, if you want to pick up the simple spiritual tools laid at your kit, is on page 63.
So, Nadia, what we also have, when you brought that up, when he became rebellious, it talks about on page, I just flipped from the page. What a yo-yo I am. Forgive me, I'm standing in for Bill today. It says we had abandoned the God idea. You remember that? Oh, yeah, here it was. Okay, I was there. 47. We had abandoned the God idea. Oh, excuse me. Is that 47? It talks about in here when they approached us with this. we abandoned the God idea. And that's exactly what he did. He abandoned the God idea. It didn't change God. It didn't change the nature of God. What he said is this is rebellious. So he abandoned that idea. It's talked about somewhere else in this chapter. I just lost the page. But notice, if something brings you to the point of self-destruction, what's another term for self-destruction? Okay, we don't see any hands on it for anyone listening on the recording, so I never ask a question I don't know the answer to. Suicide. We're talking about Fitzmayo. He was brought up in the doctor's opinion. He's talked about 3 times leading up to the text, and then his story is in the back of the book because it tells us that we're going to share an experience of one of our members that you'll find in the back of the book. So that story should remain in this book no matter how many editions come up. Correct, Rob? Because they're referring to it. And he was the one who the doctor's opinion talked about, a man who was brought in, who hid out in a deserted barn, determined to die, and was rescued by a search party. So he was on a suicidal mission to take his life. And what it's saying is all these things started to perplex him when he abandoned the God idea. I don't know if it's by design or it's just the way it happened, but he let go of the good orderly direction that was being instilled into him. And all of a sudden, all these opponents of this guiding principle started to overtake his life. The good news is that there's another principle. It's not spelled out in this book, but I'm going to give it to you. He that is in me is greater than he that is in the world, he that is in these calamities, he that is in this rebellious nature. The nature of God, he that is in me, and I didn't put him there, is greater than anything without. And that's the premise. That's a principle. That comes from another book, but it applies here. Where'd Nadja go? I can't see her.
Just switch video off my.
Oh, there you are. So she's being rocketed into the 4th dimension. There she goes.
I'm having issues with my bandwidth. So if I'm a little bit delayed, please forgive me.
You want me to read this next paragraph?
Go for it, please.
Only because I love this. One night, when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, "If there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me." But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answers, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God? So look at what's leading up to this. If you're confined to a hospital, you're probably in a locked ward. I've been confined before. I've been confined in a jail cell. That means I couldn't leave. I could walk around and they'd feed me, but I wasn't going home anytime soon. I've been confined in a psych ward where I had to be committed for another induced insanity, not alcohol, but one of its counterparts. Our friends, he was approached by someone who had had a spiritual experience. Where 2 or more of us are gathered, God is in the midst. He was revolted. Remember that movie, The Exorcist, when the guy came along and was talking about the good Lord, and all of a sudden the green pea soup was coming out of the lady's mouth that her head was spinning around? She did not like the presence of the power. So her gorge rose just like his did, but her head spun around. Doesn't say his does, so we'll assume that was for that movie. Our friend's gorge rose. Something inside of him welled up against the nature of any being other than or greater than himself. If there is a God, he hasn't done anything for me. That is, and incidentally, Self-destruction or suicide is the epitome of self. It's me playing God, determining when I'm done in this show that I had nothing to do with getting here. When you get consumed with that much self, it's like the creation saying, it's like the clay saying to the potter, you didn't do anything for me. If there's a God, could you imagine that steeped in self, where you couldn't acknowledge that the very fact that you're drawing breath is not your own idea or your own ability, but comes from something other, something greater than self. So here he is, steeped in self. If there is no God, if there is a God, he's done nothing for me. The other 8 billion people on the planet, I know he's helping them. You want to talk about consumption with self and self-pity. And then later alone in that room, he gets a moment of clarity and starts thinking, could the other 7.9 billion people on the planet be wrong? Could I be the only one that's right? And now notice that for the first time I noticed this when I read it, Nadia, he said, while pondering the answer, he's thinking, he felt as though he lived in hell, total separation from the source. And then it says, like a thunderbolt, like something that shook his foundation from the inside out. A great thought came, it crowded out all other thoughts. Who are you to say there is no God? It did not say, who am I to say there is no God? He asked himself these questions and he got an answer, but the answer came from somewhere other than his own original thought. Very simply, could you imagine hearing a thought in your head, not your own, that says, who are you, Ollie, to say there is no me? Who are you, Rob, to say there is no Bill Swan? That was the question. How could you not acknowledge something? And it talks about in our story that we read earlier with Bill Wilson. And Rob showed us that book, Bill Wilson, Bill W., First 40 Years. Have you posted anything in the chat yet today, Rob? You had to have. I mean, come on, you got to have a purpose here, okay? He's got a whole bunch of stuff. I'll give him more. And build up Bill's semi-autobiography, one that was recorded and then written by someone else, third party, but the best description of Bill's life was called Bill W. is for the first 40 years. And what it says in there is Bill's describing that moment of the ego's total collapse, what we would call he was surrendered, where he's going through this battle in his mind, similar to what Fitz is going through. And he said, Ebby came in and approached him, and now Ebby's a religious crackpot. Now he starts to think Ebby's insane. And while he's having this conversation with himself, he said, could Ebby be crazy? He said, but Ebby's sober, and I'm not. He said, could I be insane? And all this stuff's going through his mind. And then Bill says, as he stares into the abyss, the way the story reads, it's like he's looking into a cavern that's waiting to swallow him up. He said he cried out with no faith or hope. If there be a God, let him show himself. And the room lit up. Varieties of religious experience always had a collapse at depth before a revolutionary and drastic rearrangement, which redirected people, could take place. Bill wasn't the only one in the world who had it. And that was what Carl Jung was explaining to Roland Hazard, that you have to have this type of rearrangement, something that transcends the natural brought about by the supernatural. And Roland said, great, I'll have it. Where do I get it? And that was the problem. Carl Jung said, I don't know. Place yourself in some type of atmosphere of grace, and you can only hope. That was the guy's diagnosis. You can only hope. And what he set out with was something seeking. And doesn't it say in this book, Rob, a few pages back, without knowing it, we have been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith. You see, the answer was this: God could and would if he were sought. He didn't say you had to find him as soon as you're willing to seek and start heading in that direction. The revelation will become very obvious. You won't be able to avoid it. There are two forces in Alcoholics Anonymous. One is a loving God. The other is King Alcohol. That's in one of our writings. If I'm seeking one, I'll never find the other. And if I don't seek one, I'll always find the other. If I'm seeking God, I won't see the drink. If I'm seeking a drink, it's very difficult to find the power. But what happened is he was willing to change his mind, and something happened that redirected his life, and he never drank again. Back to you, Nadja. I see you're back online.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm back online. Thank you. And we're going to go into exactly what Bill's just said now. We're going to talk about promises, rock solid promises, that if you're seeking God and you're living in the disciplines of what are practiced and outlined in steps 10, 11, and 12, you will not see the drink. Let's go on to say this man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction, a firmly held belief of the presence of God. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood. It reminds me of a great wind that I felt. The old barriers, there's that word for old ideas. Old ideas, we talk a lot about that because that's what's blocking us, guys. That's what's blocking us. He had built through the years, were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. There's another nice, beautiful word for God. He had stepped from bridge to shore. What's he talking about? He's talking about the bridge of reason to the shore of faith. References made on page 53. I'm going to keep going. We'll just drop the page references in the chat because I want to get to the end of this. We want to look at what life looks like when you are connected to a power. For the first time, he lived in, here's a beautiful promise, listen to this. For the first time, he lived in constant companionship with his creator, friendship, relationship. Not a, you got to pray or you ain't going to get your red bicycle in Christmas, or you've been a bad girl, so you're only going to get a little bit of recovery. No, companionship with his creator. Thus was our friend's cornerstone fixed in place. No later vicissitudes shaken it. No problems. No death in the family. No divorce. No, what's the word when you without money? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Nothing shook it. And he did. He faced. Thank you. He faced it. He faced it. Thanks, my friend. You and I both are like swimming for words tonight. His alcoholic problem was taken away. Taken away. That very night, years ago, it disappeared. The mental obsession was removed. What a powerful promise. All I could think about was drugs and alcohol for 3 decades of my life, at the cost of marriages and small children, frothy emotional appeal from family members, friends, you name it. Save for a few moments of brief temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. And at such times, a great revulsion, like what he had showed when the word God came into the room and he was like the exorcist puking green pea soup. Now he's puking green pea soup just at the thought of alcohol. Seemingly, he could not drink even if he wanted to. God had restored his sanity. What a pack full of promises. That's what Bill is talking about. What is this? But a miracle of healing, a miracle. We get to witness more than just this. Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe, step 1. Step 2, to believe. He humbly offered himself to his maker. Step 3, then he knew. What did he know? That the great reality is deep down inside of him. Even so, has God restored us all. There's another promise. All of us in this room get to be restored to our right minds, To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly. Some of us of the educational variety, others have white light experiences. Maybe we have a mix of both throughout our recovery journey. But he has, who's he? God has come to all, and Bill just said it, who have honestly sought him. The A, B's, and C's on page 60. God could and would if he were sought. That's it. We got to do the seeking. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. Another amazing promise. Whew. Okay. I'm feeling
Condition,
all giddy.
Nadja, with a condition. So I always love that hyphen. He humbly offered himself to his maker, hyphen, then he knew. Most alcoholics want to know and then will offer. God, show me who you are. And if I like what you're working with, I'll join you on the broad highway. Doesn't work like that. When we drew near to him, when we sought him, he disclosed himself to us. Could you imagine that? That you're walking around and you can't see something that's there the whole time. And when you draw near to it, the disclosure comes. Yeah, this is a powerful, powerful chapter. Really powerful. When you said, for the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his creator. That means he was aware intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually that there was something going on between he and the creator. Conscious. I'm conscious. If I'm unconscious, I don't know what's going on. People that are in a coma are unconscious. People who are asleep in their lives, dreaming they're awake, are unconscious. But he was in conscious companionship. Like you said, partnership. We're companions, walking hand in hand on the broad highway with the spirit of the universe. If you don't
And
get
now
excited about this, oh my God.
absolutely, then you're fast asleep. Wake up, listen to this. I love what you just said, that hand in hand with the power of God. Let's go look. He says here, he stood in the presence. I mean, come on, guys, just wrap your heads around this just for a second. You've had this experience. I know that there are people in this room right now with us who've had this experience. You got a dilly look on your face because you've had that experience. You get that look, your whole deportment shot. So you've got a solution. He stood in the presence of infinite love and power. Where else does it talk about that? It says one of the promises on taking step 5 on page 75. Page 75, the third paragraph. One of the promises after you've taken step 5 is that you begin to feel the nearness of your creator. You are walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Hand in hand, like your best friend, your lover, your mom or your dad. Okay, some of us haven't had great experiences with mothers or dads. Cast aside your old ideas. Go look for some good moms and dads in this fellowship. Go look at what good parenting does look like and start wrapping your head around the fact that we have a father who adores us, who walks hand in hand with us. There's another place that talks about this on page 12. 12. The fourth paragraph. It says here, where is it? Something about the sunlight of the spirit. I've lost it. Anyway, it's here somewhere. Doesn't matter. Someone will find it for me or not. Nonetheless, those are the page references I wanted to make about what Bill just said, that promise of companionship. And he said it, conscious contact, which means we've always been in contact with this thing. We just have not been conscious to it. It's like those two fish swimming in water. And they're swimming and they're swimming and they're swimming. And the next thing, this fish comes out of nowhere, zooting around them, backflipping. And he's just like, what? Isn't water amazing? And the two fish that are just plodding along in their comatose state, eating, drinking, sexting, texting, Netflixing, overtasking, gambling, dating, you name it. And they're just fast asleep. And they look at each other and they go, water? What's water? Which fish are you?
You know, on page 9, Nadia, when Ebby made the approach to Bill, very similar to what happened with Fitz, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience. It says, so here's Ebby shows up and knocks on his door. We read that chapter, so we're just reiterating it. And it said he had that starry-eyed look. Where the hell was it, the approach?
It's on page 9, no?
It's on page 9. He come what's all this about? I queried, right? The door opened. He stood, I'm sorry, it was the second full paragraph. The door
Yeah.
opened. He stood there fresh skinned. And the meaning of that is skin that appears healthy, natural, and young. He didn't have no Botox. Fresh skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably, can't put it into words or concept, different. What had happened? Fresh skinned and glowing. When the spirit, the light of the right, we stood in total darkness and a great light appeared. When you get lit up by the power of God, you glow, radioactive.
Glow in the dark stuff, man. Come to God's salon and you glow in the dark. Trust me. All right. We're going to call it a night. Thanks. Gosh. Okay.